So people, good morning. Welcome to our Galilee sunrise stroll and chat. It's not that easy with all the traffic noise. And normally I like to stay far away from traffic, but I just had a sentiment a few moments ago that I imagine many of you in countries where there are very severe lockdowns right now that the possibility of moving is a very good thing, and being able to go to work, to be able to pursue one's goals and objectives. I was very impressed with the conversation I had with another sister last night. Celine and I had with a sister who just had her birthday yesterday, our youngest sister, and she's a wonderful teacher in Dublin, and talking about the lockdown, and the restrictions. And Ireland at this moment has a very secular government. Maybe there are even elements that are much less than friendly toward people of faith, but it was a wonderful conversation speaking about the sensitivity for the vulnerable, the elderly, and there's a very strong discipline of lockdown, of encounter. And I think it's longer than we had here, for over 3 weeks that we had here. They have, or a month I think we almost had in the high holiday season here. And so I think it's 6 weeks in Ireland. And there are other countries as well in Europe that are going through this and going through very high infection rates. I'm just crossing the road here, this busy road. Good morning. Lady out here hiking, and I'm crossing for a simple reason. I want to get to see. I'm coming over this barrier now so that I'm away from the traffic. And I want to show you something very special here. Some of you might remember that we were here before. So it's still not going to be easy to speak. But it's great really to have all this traffic activity, because at some point these lockdowns will be over and life will be back to normal. So I encourage you not to lose hope and to be reasonable about all of this behavior that we're trying to discern as a human family in front of such an evil as a pandemic. And sometimes there are very polarized opinions, and I think we all need to be patient with each other, because who really knows the best solution? So people have responsibility, they call for decisions, there's a probing, a trial, and surely trial and error. Edison had how many times? Hundreds of times he failed in his experiments to produce an electric light. But the final one made it. So in the midst of this pandemic, it's good to hear in another country that the traffic has opened up again. And we just have to be patient through these difficult times and be supportive to all those who most need our help and our care, that they do not feel abandoned. And that's a big prayer for our hearts and a big program for our lives. And now we're here at this stone that's very strange. Look at the size of it. Like there's a car, and I didn't adjust the phone size, the zoom size. So I imagine if I did an experiment I could probably fit in there, and I'm over 6 feet tall. So these are actually burial places. And these look like 2 adults, and then a space for the remains of a child. And maybe we'll even walk to see another place further up on the hill. There was also a burial. And this is just a big plain rock, right? And it's carved into for burial. It probably got turned over in the process of the road construction, because it was probably not at that angle, and probably this side here was wheeled back on this side here originally. So now you have seen it from all angles. You can take your screenshot there if you want of the structure, and we'll head up the hill here, not too much, and maybe we'll have enough time in this stroll and chat to get to another one that I showed you also recently. And we'll get away from a little bit, not too much, from the traffic, so we can speak more at ease. So the reason I showed you these is today is a special day all over the Western world, remembering the deceased in the Christian tradition. And it's an age-old custom. It probably coincides also with the time of harvest, beginning of November. Really, winter is setting in all over Europe. And then with winter, the thought of death. And death brings us to the graveyards, to the cemeteries, to burial. It's a little rough down here, so I think I'll go back this way here and go at this angle. The sunrise is still coming along, we can't forget that. So we can go up here, it's just a little bit easier. You see the cows left a lot of their signs of presence here. So obviously the date then also is joined to the celebration of All Saints, which we had yesterday, the 1st of November. And then everybody dies. You know that song, Everybody Hurts? Well, everybody dies. And there's sunrise. And actually I can't get the moon setting now, but it's behind the cliff there. It was still pretty high up when I was coming out this morning. The full moon. It's just peaking or peaked. So I think this will be more or less the height we'll have for the rest of the stroll if we head over to this other spot that also has a burial from the 1st century, around this time. So obviously the one we saw, the remains were removed. They're no longer there. They were lost. Whatever. Cremation is a practice so that completes in another way the loss, the physical loss. And there's mourning and sadness and tears, bereavement. We cease to exist. The deceased. And some people would say we shouldn't be thinking about these things. That's too pessimistic, too negative, too tetric. But then we don't want to be like those famous birds that put their head in the sand when there's a storm and not face reality. The reality, the stark reality of death. Are you ready for a little shocker? I forgot I had this here. I put this up here. The head of a cow. So with all of life on this planet, we also share an end of the road for our physical activity in this world. And yesterday we had a very interesting stroll and chat in the morning, walking through the cemeteries of the Jewish people in Jerusalem and the Muslim people and the Christian people. So after our stroll and chat yesterday morning, I was coming up to the Lion's Gate. That's 7 different names: the Sheep Gate, St. Anne's Gate, and St. Stephen's Gate. And there was a man praying in front of his mother's grave with great devotion, great piety, man of great education, very professional formation, and he was a Muslim. I was very touched by this, and if those of you who have had the Instagram, you probably saw we just had a little brief encounter, and I was still changing into the Instagram mode. I wanted to capture him praying, but that didn't. He just started to walk away then because I had delayed about him a couple of minutes. And I actually know the man, and he's been 30 years professional in a very significant US company in aviation, and he's obviously now retired. A retired man praying at his mother's grave yesterday, a Muslim man. And you know, it was very interesting, our little encounter there between all those burial places. And we all won there. We're born more or less the same way, very helpless. We're usually born without a language. We have to learn it. And we're born without the ability to feed ourselves. We have to be helped. And to clothe ourselves. We're born without social skills, and we acquire them. We're born without culture, and we acquire it from the people around us. And then we all face the challenge of growth, of life, founding family, building community, working, learning to gain dominion on the earth, like the first chapters of Genesis tell us, and many times making many blunders, many mistakes. And then we all face sickness together, like the pandemic. In this way, our world consciousness, especially due to the social media, and the promptness of information worldwide, we all face this pandemic together. And how many people have been buried. I just saw a little recording of my home diocese bishop and clergy and lay people praying at cemeteries yesterday in County Clare in Ireland. And everybody it's very concrete. Maybe we try to hide it, we try to make death beautiful, but death is death. And today we have a day to think about this. If we're on a train traveling, we need to know where the train is going to stop. And we're heading to a destination, and part of the description of our destination, there's one station we all go through, and it's called death. And it's good for us, it's healthy for us to face this truth. It was a very interesting experience for us when we were in Rome. We obviously visited the cemeteries in Rome on the 2nd of November. By the way, just look at these little flowers because they're precious. And we had rain last night. I imagine these were already on their way before the rain came, but we had rain here I even heard it at a moment of semi-awakeness. These are so tiny. Look, there's my finger. What a promise of life, what a testimony to the divine artist and the divine engineer and the divine creator. And the Bible teaches us that our life is like a flower that blooms and withers in a day. So then in the different religious tradition, we have our way of dealing with this as well. Culturally also, of course. There are so many poems and sonnets and literature about death and how to deal with death. And there are cultures, like here in the Middle East, the Arab peoples and the Jewish people stop everything for 7 days, and they're in mourning, sitting in mourning, and all their friends come and visit with them, and they're expressing their mourning, and the tears are flowing, the sadness is very palpable, and it's not just a momentary passing thing. They really accept it and go into it. And I would propose that this is a very healthy way, where the whole community is gathered together and people are not alone in their grief. They're carried by others. And we need that community, and that's one of the biggest sufferings of the pandemic, is so many funerals. And Bishop Fenton mentioned this yesterday in this, or Saturday, I guess yesterday, in the ceremony, the grief of so many who had to be buried alone without even family. The grief of their families not to be able to say goodbye at the last moment. So these are hard realities. So here we are at the other burial place. Finally we got here. And actually this is a tomb or a grave. And according to the archaeologists that looked at it recently, it's 1st century. Around that time. So it's amazing here on the hillside. So obviously this hillside looked a little different at that time. Maybe there are more around here. It's hard to think that it would be completely solitary. There are also these ashlars, and they're like ones we have in our archaeology, which was covered for a couple of thousand years, but that wouldn't be any conclusive reasoning there, but they're like the stones they had at that time. So who knows what's here in this hillside. There's a famous reflection meditation from Pope John Paul II, how the whole world is increasingly becoming dotted with cemeteries. And so there's a geography of awaiting the resurrection. It's a beautiful thought, when all the dead will rise. And there, of course, is our faith then expressed, which is already in well over 100 years before Christ in the book of the Maccabees. And they find the fallen in their victorious battle, their own fallen, and they found that they all had amulets of false worship. So they collected an offering and went to the temple in Jerusalem to pray for them. And there the text goes on to say, and this was a most noble and beautiful thought, in view of the resurrection of the dead, asking God for his mercy for them. And it's been the church's experience over 2,000 years, a gradual experience of prayer. And prayer is always good. No prayer is ever wasted. Maybe our prayers sometimes can be selfishly motivated, but even that prayer is bringing us before God, and there has to be some little effect from that little bit of contact with God. His grace is always effective, always working. And there's a famous proverb that God who created us without us will not save us without us. He wants Abraham to say yes, he wants Mary to say yes, he wants Moses to agree to lead the people even though he's not a good speaker. He wants our yes, and Isaiah gives it gladly. Here I am, send me. And Jeremiah is very reluctant and he fights, and also the prophet Jonah, resistance. So this is the taking the pulse of humanity, you know. And so we need prayer, and we need to pray, and it's always a blessing. And God also takes into account our collaboration. Like the little boy up here at the multiplication of the loaves, he gave his 5 loaves and 2 little fish. And Jesus fed thousands with it. Let's provide our prayer, our collaboration with God. And so in this spirit, people always have prayed for the deceased, expressed their wishes before God. Lord, have mercy on my parents, have mercy on my siblings, have mercy on my grandparents. And this is a big mystery of how our little bit collaborates with God. And in that sense, we always have this tradition then of praying for the deceased, entrusting them to God's mercy. And as Christians, obviously, we have our full hope in Christ, in the resurrection from the dead, accepting his gift of forgiveness and mercy. So I encourage you today, if you have the opportunity, to actually visit a local cemetery if it's possible for you to leave your home and go there. Otherwise, you've already done a virtual one this morning visiting these burial places, and we pray for them that they will be cloaked in God's mercy. How many surprises we're going to have in heaven when we get there. How judgmental we are so often. And little by little our heart gets opening up for more and more light in our lives. It's a wonderful experience here in Magdala. labelled crossroads of Jewish and Christian history, and really the Spirit is a crossroads for everyone. And learning to live together, to listen to each other. We have different theological viewpoints, or maybe an atheological viewpoint of the world if somebody is atheist or agnostic. And yet we can listen to each other without condemning. We can see, okay, what lies behind your thought pattern, your behavior pattern? And let's give reason for our faith. We need to be capable of doing that. That's a big call in the New Testament to all of us believers in Jesus, to give reason for our faith. And so today we entrust all our beloved in the Lord's presence, all who have gone before us, and we're getting each day a day closer ourselves. So that's the realism of death, and we know, okay, well, I have a mission to accomplish. Let's go with God, in God's name, in trusting in His mercy. Let's use the time we have to do good, to raise up, to encourage, to serve, to show compassion. God bless you today. Thank you for joining here at the Sea of Galilee from the foot of Mount Arbel, overlooking Magdala.